I think John McMullen would like that stat. He used to cover the NBA. He now covers the NFL and the Philadelphia Eagles for us at 97.3 ESPN.com. There's a quirky stat to bring you into the conversation, John.
Yeah, it is quirky, and Harvey would have loved that one. But it also tells you one other thing about the NBA. It tells you the Sixers weren't playing.
They'll play tonight against the Sacramento Kings, which is a no-lose situation for the Sixers. They can win and win. They can lose, and they still can take the Kings' pick whenever they feel like it. Like, hey, give me your lunch money there, pal. That was one of the classic hinky trades there. That we can just take your pick whenever we feel like it. All right, John, you were at NovaCare today. Doug Pederson, he gave some real whoppers of an answers on some questions today that I'd like to dive into. Let's first, though, update the injury situation because there's a couple of big ones out there. One being Jordan Matthews, not practicing, right, but should be ready to go come Sunday?
Yeah, they held him out today. No surprise there, and they continue to say he is going to play in the game, so that's the most important part, and that's not rare when you get to this time of the season in the NFL. You have banged-up players, and veteran guys can miss a day or even two and get on the field and perform. So I think the key part there is that Jordan might not be here on Wednesday on the field, but he's going to be able to go on Sunday when it counts.
All right. How about his partner in crime there, Nelson Agholor? Any gut feeling on which direction they're going with him this week?
Yeah, I get the feeling he's going to play after they took the step back. Doug won't say that he wants to see what happens during practice this week and how he handles it. But, I'm not sure what he can do in practice that proves he's mentally strong enough to get over this hump. I think they got to throw him out there and see. And the realization from the Green Bay game was that as poorly as Nelson was playing, Bryce Treggs is not the answer. Paul Turner's not the answer. So you almost have to roll the dice and hope he can get over this mental hurdle and contribute to this offense. I don't expect it, but there's not really many other options they can go with.
Yeah, I mean, it's almost like if you didn't find out enough about him last week in practice, like what can he do to change? If he's having self-described mental issues, who can jump into this guy's head to find out whether or not he's ready? It's just basically you just saying, optically speaking, we wanted to sit him last week, and now this week, okay, we think he's over these problems, we're going to play him.
Yeah, and I think it's more of the plan was there was nothing that Nelson was going to do last week to get him on the field. The plan was to give him a step back, to let him watch from the sidelines, whatever that accomplishes, and then bring him back after a week. And if that's the plan, that's the plan. I don't have an issue with it. I just think, as I said on the show a number of times, if you're trying to give the guy confidence, hey, that Green Bay secondary was the one to do it against. As poorly as Cincinnati has played this year, they have a lot better secondary than the Packers do. So from that standpoint, I didn't like the plan, but we'll see how it works out.
John, we asked Dave Weinberg earlier if he thought the loss of Lane Johnson was the turning point in the season, and Doug had some answers today about the offensive line and how it's going to be constructed. Of course, Doug Pederson had some interesting and strange answers today in his press conference as well. But your take right now on what the moves they're going to do at the offensive line, and I guess I'll ask the same question first and foremost, was losing Lane Johnson the turning point in this season?
Yeah, I think it was. I said that yesterday on the show. You were gone, Pete, but
not forgotten.
Hey, they haven't been the same. They haven't been certainly not forgotten, but they haven't been the same since Lane left the lineup, and they have not scored more than 24 points since that day. They obviously are not the same offensively. Now, Lane Johnson's not going to improve your skill position player. So, as opposing defenses got more film on the Eagles, I think it was going to get worse and worse as the season progressed, no matter what, because people are going to realize pretty quickly, hey, there's nobody who's going to scare you. There's nobody who's going to beat you outside. And it was people, as people started to realize that, they were going to clamp down a little bit more. So I think it was always going to take a downtick, but to lose one of your best 2 or 3 players, it's an impact, and it's created a void on the offensive line. I don't think it's been that Vaitai has played poorly, or that Barber played poorly when kicking out, or that Wisniewski has played poorly. It's just they're not as good as Lane. So obviously it's going to hurt the team at least a little bit.
Hey, something Dave said kind of stood out because I kind of asked this question a lot when it came up. And looking at Barber, he play right tackle, and Wisniewski play guard, he goes back to how that whole situation with Vaitai playing tackle and that, his whole explanation for that was kind of, ridiculous going back to that. Like, they should have just gone with Barber playing right tackle to begin with and Wisniewski playing left guard. We talk about the whole season, maybe turning around with Lane Johnson going out. Is he right? I mean, is Dave right? And I kind of argued the same thing, that why not just play Barber at right, play Wisniewski at left guard? Like, could things have been a little different? Because, yes, their offense has struggled since Johnson went out.
Well, I think what you're trying to do there is you're trying to kind of serve 2 masters. So I think it tells you a little bit about the Eagles' mentality, and that they're trying to groom a guy long-term in Vaitai, and they think he could be a potential long-time starter at right tackle. And the plan is for Lane to flip over to left tackle when Jason Peters decides to call it quits. And if you think about it that way, Wisniewski signs a 1-year deal. There's no guarantee he's even going to be here next year. So in the short term, yeah, I agree with you guys. I agree with you and Dave. I think the best offensive line would have been Wiz at left guard and Barber at right tackle for today, but for tomorrow, that's not the best plan. And I don't think this team was going to be a significant contender. So I don't have an issue on trying to groom Vaitai as a potential long-term starter. So depends how you want to frame it. If you want to win on Sunday and you want to put the best players out there, yeah, you go with Barber at right tackle, Wiz at left guard. But I think the Eagles are doing more than that. They're trying to win, certainly, but they're trying to build this thing long-term.
John, I want to ask you on the defensive side of the ball. Pederson was asked today that there's been talk about Jalen Mills just starting and playing the entire game. Should Mills play over McKelvin? McKelvin was a guy that you said back in camp he was their best guy, but that hamstring, of course, seems like it's been an issue all season.
Yeah, it has, and I kind of chuckled at that question because I don't know what that person was watching, but Jalen has not played well this season. I give him a ton of credit for really, really his stick-to-itiveness. He works hard. He tries. He doesn't let things affect him. And he certainly performed well for a 7th-round draft choice. But if you look at the long term, coming into last night's game, he was 119 out of 119 from Pro Football Focus as corners in the NFL. So it's not like Jalen's playing well. But what we just talked about with Vaitai applies there as well, in the fact that you're trying to groom guys long term. And I think a lot of the experience he's getting this season will help further down the line. I still think his ceiling sort of as a player is probably a sub-package guy, probably a nickel. You don't want Jalen Mills to be a starting corner on your team. And that's part of the issue with the Eagles defense. They don't have good corners. And while Leotis is their best corner, and he has played like their best corner when he's on the field, he's not a number 1 corner in this league. So you have to improve at that particular position. Where it differs a little bit is he signed a 2-year deal, so he should be back next year, Leotis, and at least help this defense. So when you're talking about grooming young players, I think they've done a good job with Mills, and that's to sort of have this rotation with the 3 guys, Leo, Mills, and also Nolan Carroll.
You say grooming young players. Well, being a rookie head coach like Doug Pederson is, does that make it extra difficult for him then with this many rookies playing at once, especially on offense, but really both sides of the ball? Has that made things even more difficult for Doug?
Of course it has. You don't want to be in a position where you have to play a seventh-round pick. You don't want to be in a position where you have to play a fifth-round pick at running back. Mike and I talked about that a little yesterday because a lot of people thought Wendell Smallwood should have gotten more touches against the Packers. And you bring up the Chiefs and what they were able to do when Jamal Charles went down. But understand, that's persevering. You don't want to do it. Sometimes you have to do it. So anytime you have to throw people like Jalen Mills out there and Wendell Smallwood, and even, by the way, Isaac Seumalo, but even Carson Wentz, who had nary a preseason, basically, and you have to throw him out there week one, it's not the best case scenario for a head coach, but you do have to persevere.
Doug asked today about Wentz, too, the fact that, the college guys, do they run out of gas? And then also asked about his mechanics as well. What were some of the things that Doug offered on Carson Wentz today?
Well, Carson's biggest issue has been mechanics and footwork since day one coming in. And Doug's been talking about that since OTAs. And that continues to be a work in progress. You saw the interception, airmailing it right down the middle of the football field. I mean, you just can't do that in the NFL. It's going to get picked every time. And that's what happened, and he's throwing off his back foot. And there's a second part to that, though. Everybody has to have good footwork in the NFL to play the quarterback position. But there are times where you're going to have to change your arm angle. You're going to have to throw off your wrong foot. And that's what makes the special guys. And you saw the most special on Monday night. Nobody does that better than Aaron Rodgers, who can change arm slots and throw off the wrong foot and still have incredible accuracy. Whether Carson ever develops to that point, that level is probably unlikely, but you certainly expect the footwork to improve at some point.
Wasn't he supposed to be surrounded by the dream team of quarterback coaches, though? Shouldn't he be showing the improvement by now if he has Doug Pederson and he has Frank Reich and he has DeFlo and he has all these guys that are supposed to be working with him?
Who was that last guy?
Yeah, and I think he's improved dramatically since he got here. I really do. Again, that 3-0 start kind of raised expectations to an unrealistic level. They're beating Cleveland, beating Chicago. The one legitimate opponent in that group is Pittsburgh. So we now know in hindsight it wasn't quite as impressive as it looked. And I think over the next series of games, and remember, Lane also goes out. We talked about that. I think Carson has shown incremental improvement. It might not show up on the statistics, but as far as watching him play, I think he's still doing the right things. He still makes very few mistakes compared to most rookie quarterbacks. And from his standpoint, I think most of it still remains positive.
John DeFilippo, the name that Mike Gill was asking me to say and pronounce correctly, by the way.
It just sounded like a...
well, I wasn't 100% sure, and I mix up Dave Phipp and John DeFilippo sometimes. So
I actually think we recorded what you said, and let's see if we have the official playback on that one here. In real time. Here
wonderful.
We go. This is how it came out. All right.
John McMullen with us here on 97.3 ESPN. So answer this question then about Carson Wentz. Did they get it right with him? Is he a franchise QB?
Yeah, they got it right. I think that's the one thing I don't ask questions about with this team. I think they got their franchise quarterback. I think it's pretty evident, and I think they're pretty happy with it, and I think they know that. I don't think they've wavered on that. What they've wavered on is they kind of fell into the trap that a lot of us did and took too much out of that 3-0 start and changed expectations. Because remember, Pete, if you rewind to the trade 8 days before the regular season, everybody's talking about, maybe 5 wins, maybe 6 wins. Hey, they're at 5 already, and we got 5 to play. So I think if you take a step back and look at this realistically, it's been a success thus far.
So today, Doug Pederson asked about self-scouting, which is a phrase that always gets me to start chuckling. And then first off, what did you think about his answer? And secondly, how would you self-scout Doug?
Well, self-scouting, you're probably right to chuckle because the NFL, believe it or not, from being around this league a very long time, they do very little of that during the season, with the exception of the bye week. You kind of have a self-scout and look at yourself and see what you're doing, if there's any trends that are noticeable and easily accessible to the opposing defensive or offensive coordinators. But that's it. Basically, once you're in the season, it's geared towards winning that week, and it becomes a sort of a routine. You start on Wednesday, obviously, and everything goes in that same direction. So, a lot of coaches pay lip service to it, but that's about all it is. And as far as my self-scout of Doug, I say it all the time, and I've said it early in the season. And I said it yesterday with Mike. You should not be a head coach in this league and call plays. I don't care if you're an offensive guy, a defensive guy. There's too much to do on game day on the sidelines, and that creates mistakes, and that's where you see the 3rd and 2 challenge. Not the 3rd and 2, but the 2-yard challenge, which Doug finally admitted today was a mistake. That's when you start making those mistakes because your mind is going in 15 different directions. And generally, while I say that, not generally, every single first-year head coach calls plays. So it's not like Doug is rare. Every single one of them. It's the veteran guys who have been doing this for a long time to come to grips with reality and say, there's too much to do. I got to delegate. And hopefully Doug gets to that point where he's successful enough to get to the point where he says, you know what? I'm entrenched. I'm going to hand this off to whoever the coordinator is at that time, if it's Frank Reich or somebody else. Hopefully we see that. But he's not alone in making these kinds of mistakes. And one of the reasons coaches make these kinds of mistakes is because they have too much on their plate.
Couple quick NFL points with John McMullen here, 97.3 ESPN.com. Also, FanRagSports.com covers the NFL. John, Oregon fired its coach. If you're Chip Kelly, do you run like hell from the 49ers and take that job, or do you wait out your fate in San Francisco?
Well, you're going to take a huge hit in your reputation if you leave in season. So I don't know if he can do that. You saw what happened to Bobby Petrino.
I mean, I'm not talking about leave like right now. I mean, just like at the end of this year, bow out gracefully, and I'm heading back to Oregon. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I mean, if he had the opportunity. But remember why he left Oregon. So there's a lot of questions whether they would even want him back because of all the acrimony at the end there. So, but yeah, I mean, he belongs in college. He's got to realize that by now. The problem is Texas is already filled. As you mentioned, Oregon, but he has some muddy history there that he's got to overcome. Maybe Notre Dame opens at some point. I don't know if any other. LSU already filled their spot. So there's not a lot of high-profile jobs out there. Maybe Jim Harbaugh comes back to the NFL.
You said yesterday you think he comes back to the NFL next year.
Yeah, I do.
I think you said that off the air. I don't remember if that was on or off the air, but you believe Harbaugh will be done at Michigan following this season.
Yeah, I think he's going to be first on a lot of teams' lists, and he's going to get opportunity after opportunity And I think he's an NFL guy at heart. I think he wants to go back, and I think he will be back. It's just a matter of when. And, yeah, I think it could be as soon as this offseason.
But will he have those horn-rimmed glasses like the Maytag repairman or the 1950s coach on?
Well, I know he'll have the khakis. We know that.
Absolutely. Sports Bash here with Pete Thompson, John McMullen, 97.3 ESPN. Eagles and the Bengals this Sunday. Eagles have never won in Cincinnati, PT. Never won.
They've tied
in Cincinnati. All right, John, with more tomorrow on the show on the NFC East, the NFL news. That's all coming up tomorrow right here on the Sports Bash. Thanks, John.
Hey, thanks, guys.